this video making the rounds online that's painting a pretty stark picture for New York City, and it all revolves around its new mayor. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct that argument piece by piece to see exactly how it's built. Let's dive in.
Okay, so the entire argument in this video really hinges on this one core idea. This quote is the bedrock of their whole case, and it frames the entire debate as this fundamental clash over how taxes affect a city's economy.
So, what's the basic premise here? Well, the video claims that New York City has just elected a new mayor, a guy named Zoran Mamdani, and it argues that his policies are putting the city on a direct path toward economic decline.
The video really hones in on the new mayor's fiscal plans. It's all about these proposed tax hikes, specifically on the city's top earners and its biggest companies. These tax increases are presented as the trigger for everything else that's about to unfold.
All right, so that brings us to the first pillar of the argument, the numbers. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. The video spends a lot of time breaking down the specific tax burden it claims people and businesses are going to face under these new policies.
The video puts this number front and center. It's powerful. The claim is that under these new proposals, the combined personal income tax rate for New York City's highest earners would shoot up to over 52%. This single figure is absolutely central to their argument about financial incentives.
So how do they even get to a number that high? Well, this slide shows you the math. You can see how they do it. They basically stack everything up. You've got the top federal rate, then the New York State rate, the existing New York City rate, and then right on top, they tack on the mayor's proposed 2% surtax to get to their grand total.
And to really drive this point home, the video shows you this side-by-side comparison. It puts New York's high state tax rate right next to Florida and Texas. And what do they have? A 0% state income tax. The message is pretty clear, right? It's arguing that there are very attractive, lower tax alternatives just to claim right away.
Okay, so after talking about personal taxes, the argument pivots over to corporations. The video claims that the proposed hike would push New York City's combined corporate tax rate to almost 19%. And, of course, they put that number right next to New Jersey's rate to suggest a massive competitive disadvantage.
And to back this up, they pull out this quote, which they attribute to the former governor. The idea here is to show that the risk of companies just picking up and moving across the river isn't some crazy new theory. It's a concern that's been voiced by people in power for a while.
So, this whole tax argument, it leads directly into their next big claim, that people and businesses leaving the city isn't just some threat for the future, but something that's already happening right now.
The video throws out this big number, 128,000. That's how many people they claim left New York City in just a 16-month window. And they present this as hard proof that the outflow is already happening, and it's big.
So who exactly is leaving? Well, if you look at the data they present, it's pretty interesting. The largest group isn't the millionaires, but the middle class, people earning between about $50,000 and $100,000. The argument they're making is that this is the group getting squeezed the hardest by the cost of living.
So where are all these people and their money going? Well, the video has an answer for that. It points to Florida as the #1 destination. And it claims that $14 billion, that's billion with a B, in taxable income has already moved from New York to Florida. That's a huge potential hit to New York's tax base, according to their argument.
To put a face to this argument, they bring in a pretty big name, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Chase. He's quoted talking about how officials in Texas are basically rolling out the red carpet, actively asking what they can do to earn his business. The video uses this to contrast with what it portrays as a much less friendly environment in New York.
And with that, JP Chase becomes Exhibit A in their case. They use these workforce numbers to paint a picture of a major financial giant actively shifting its people, its jobs, away from New York and towards states like Texas.
Okay, so we've seen the numbers and the examples, but what's the theory behind it all? Why does the video believe this is all happening? Let's get into the economic philosophy they lay out.
To set this up, the video pulls this quote, supposedly, right from the new mayor's campaign, and they present this as the opposing viewpoint, the philosophy that they are about to try and take apart. And this is where they lay out their main economic argument. They call it the socialist fallacy. They define it as the idea that the economy is static, that the tax base is just a fixed pie you can keep cutting into. Their whole point is, no, the economy is dynamic. People and capital are mobile, and they will respond to incentives by moving away from high-tax places.
And to show this isn't just about New York, they list a bunch of other big-name companies: Tesla, Oracle, Citadel.
They're trying to frame this as part of a bigger national trend, a pattern of major businesses fleeing what they call high-tax blue states for lower-tax red states.
So where does all this lead? Well, it builds to a pretty dramatic conclusion, a grim prediction for New York City's future. They call it a death spiral.
The video actually lays out this whole timeline of collapse. In year 1, they say the tax hikes hit, and companies start to leave. Then in year 2, whoops, that creates a budget shortfall, which leads to calls for even higher taxes. And by year 3, boom, a full-on fiscal crisis for the city.
And the argument wraps up by saying who the real victims are here. They argue it's not the wealthy people who get hurt, they can just pack up and move. No, the people who will suffer the most are the working-class residents who are left behind to deal with worse city services and fewer jobs. And that's the argument, from start to finish. It takes you from a single tax policy to a whole economic theory and all the way to a prediction of total collapse. And it really makes you think, right? It leaves us with this big question. Beyond just taxes, what is the complex mix of things, from cost of living and safety to culture and quality of life, that truly drives the decisions about where we live and where companies choose to do business?